If you're over 40 and you feel like weight loss has gotten harder, even though you're eating the same way you always have, you're not imagining it. The rules have literally changed. Your biology has shifted and no one told you. And here's what makes it worse. The advice you're getting, the diets, the programs, the just eat less and move more, it's all based on a body that you don't have anymore. And that's why it's not working. And that's why you feel like it's failing. And that's why you're about to learn something that could change everything. Let me tell you what I hear every single day from women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I used to be able to cut carbs for 2 weeks and drop 10 pounds, and now I do the exact same thing and the scale doesn't move. I'm exercising more than I did in my 30s. I'm eating less than I did in my 30s, and I'm gaining weight. My doctor ran labs and said everything is fine, but I don't feel fine. Something is wrong and no one can tell me what. And I also hear I'm doing everything right. I meal prep, I track my food, I go to the gym, and I'm still gaining. What is wrong with me? Or I hear I watch my friend eat pizza and wine and stay the same size, and I eat salad and gain 2 pounds. How is that fair? Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. You are not crazy. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not failing. Your body changed. The rules changed, and you've been trying to win a game that doesn't exist anymore, using a rule book that was written for a younger version of you. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what changed, why it changed, and most importantly, why the answer isn't trying harder. The answer is something more specific to you. So let's get into it. To understand what's happening now, we need to understand what was happening before. In your 20s and 30s, your body was running on a hormonal system that had been pretty stable since puberty. Estrogen was high, progesterone was circling normally. Your metabolism was humming along, and estrogen, which most people think of as just a reproductive hormone, was actually doing something really important for your metabolism. Estrogen was telling your body where to store the fat, and the instruction was clear. Store it here. This is called subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous, under the skin. This fat sits in a layer just beneath your skin, primarily in your hips, thighs, and butt. And what most people don't realize is that this fat is relatively safe. It's not metabolically dangerous. It's not inflammatory. It's your body's reserve tank. Your body was storing energy in a protective way, preparing for potential pregnancy, potential famine, potential stress. And this is what female bodies have done for thousands of years. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. And because estrogen was high, the system worked. Fat stayed where it was supposed to stay. Your weight stayed relatively defined. Your body composition stayed relatively stable, even if you weren't perfect with your diet. But then something starts to happen. And for most women, somewhere between 35 and 45, sometimes earlier, sometimes a bit later, perimenopause begins. And I want to be clear about what perimenopause actually is, because most women don't even realize that they're in it. Perimenopause isn't menopause. Menopause is just one day, 12 months after your last period. Perimenopause is the 5 to 10 years leading up to that. Now, during perimenopause, your hormones don't just decline. They go on a roller coaster. Estrogen spikes and crashes. Progesterone drops. The ratio between them gets thrown off. Your cycle might get shorter, longer, heavier, lighter, unpredictable, and your body starts getting a completely new set of instructions. The instruction is no longer store fat in the hips and thighs. The new instruction is store fat here, around your belly, around your organs, around your midsection. And this is called visceral fat. And visceral fat is a completely different beast, subcutaneous fat that you've been carrying your whole adult life. And let me show you why this matters so much. This is a visceral fat cell. And here's what most people, including most doctors, don't fully explain. Visceral fat is not passive storage. Subcutaneous fat, the fat on your hips and thighs, mostly just sits there. It's stored energy waiting to be used. Visceral fat is different. Visceral fat is metabolically active. It doesn't just store energy, it does things. It sends signals. It produces hormones. It releases chemicals into your bloodstream. In fact, visceral fat is now classified by researchers as an endocrine organ. It behaves like a gland, like your thyroid or your adrenals, and it's actively influencing your entire body. And what is this organ doing? What signals is it sending? Let me show you, because this is where everything starts to make sense. Visceral fat cells release inflammatory molecules called cytokines. The main ones are TNF-alpha, IL-6, IL-1 beta, these aren't just fancy scientific words. These are the molecules that create inflammation in your body. Now, inflammation isn't always bad. When you cut your finger, inflammation is part of healing. When you get a virus, inflammation helps you fight it off. But this is different. This is chronic, low-grade, systemic inflammation, and it's not fighting an infection. It's not healing a wound. It's just there all the time, day after day, coming from your own fat tissue. And here's what chronic inflammation does to your metabolism. This is one of your cells. It could be a muscle cell. It could be a liver cell. And this thing on the surface is an insulin receptor. Insulin is a hormone that acts like a key. When you eat food and your blood sugar rises, insulin is released. It travels to your cells, fits into these receptors like a key in a lock, and opens the door so that sugar can get inside the cell and be used for energy. That's how it's supposed to work. But when those inflammatory cytokines are circulating throughout your body, when TNF-alpha or IL-6 are constantly present, they do something to these receptors. They damage them. They make them less responsive. They essentially change the locks. Now, insulin shows up with the key, but the key doesn't fit as well. The door doesn't open as easily. Sugar can't get into the cells efficiently. And this is called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is the beginning of the end of your metabolism. When your cells are insulin resistant, sugar can't get in to be used for energy. So what happens to that sugar? Your body has to do something with it. It can't just leave it floating around in your bloodstream. That's dangerous. High blood sugar damages blood vessels, nerves, organs. So your body converts that sugar into fat. And where does it store it? Right back in the visceral fat around your belly. And now you have more visceral fat, which releases more inflammatory cytokines, which causes more insulin resistance, which stores more fat. You're not stuck because you're eating too much. You're not stuck because you're not exercising enough. You're not stuck because you lack willpower. You're stuck in a biological cycle, a feedback loop, a vicious cycle that feeds itself. And this cycle will keep running no matter how perfectly you eat, no matter how many miles you run, until you understand how to break it. And here's the critical question. Why do some women struggle more than others? If this cycle happens to all women during perimenopause, then why do some women barely notice it while others feel like their entire body has turned against them? You know what I'm talking about. You have a friend who went through menopause and gained maybe 5 pounds and she complains about it, but honestly, she looks basically the same. Meanwhile, you feel like you aged 10 years and 18 months. Your body changed shape completely. Your energy disappeared. Your clothes don't fit. And nothing you do makes a difference. Why? Is she just more disciplined? Does she have better genes? Well, maybe she might have better genes, but not in the way that you think, not skinny genes versus fat genes. The difference is in how her body is genetically programmed to handle this transition, how her body processes hormones, how her body responds to inflammation, how her cells respond to insulin. These things are determined by your DNA and they vary enormously from woman to woman. So let me show you the specific genes that matter. The first gene I want to talk to you about is called COMT. COMT is an enzyme, and the job is to break down certain chemicals in your body. These chemicals are estrogen metabolites, dopamine, adrenaline, cortisol. So COMT is responsible for clearing both your estrogen and your stress hormones. Now, here's where genetics come in. There are different variants of the COMT gene. Some people have fast COMT. Their enzyme works quickly, clearing these chemicals efficiently. Other people have slow COMT. Their enzyme works more slowly. So these chemicals hang around longer. About 20 to 30% of women have the slow COMT variant. If you have slow COMT, here's what happens. Your estrogen levels are fluctuating during perimenopause. Your body is slower to clear estrogen metabolites. Some of these metabolites are inflammatory. Some disrupt the estrogen-progesterone balance. And the result is more severe perimenopause symptoms, worse PMS, heavier periods, more breast tenderness, more hormonal chaos, and it doesn't stop there. Slow COMT also means you clear cortisol more slowly. Cortisol is your stress hormone. Everybody knows about cortisol. So if you have a slow COMT and you exercise and you experience stress, a hard day at work, an argument with your spouse, a bad night of sleep, even an intense workout, that cortisol spike stays elevated longer than it would in someone with fast COMT. You literally experience stress longer at a physiological level. And what does elevated cortisol do? Cortisol tells your body to to store fat in the midsection specifically. It breaks down muscle tissue for energy, and it increases appetite, especially for high-calorie, high-sugar foods. So if you have slow COMT, you're getting hit from both sides. Your estrogen metabolism is compromised and your stress response is prolonged. Your body is primed to store belly fat. Now, if you don't know if you have slow COMT, what might you do? You might think, I need to work harder to lose this belly fat. So you do more intense exercise. But intense exercise is a stress. It spikes cortisol. And because you have slow COMT, that cortisol doesn't clear effectively. So you're actually making the problem worse by trying to solve it with a strategy that doesn't match your genetics. And this is why generic advice fails. This is why what works for your friend doesn't work for you. It's not that you're doing something wrong, it's that you're doing something wrong for your body. The second gene I want to tell you about is FTO. It stands for fat, mass, and obesity associated gene. Scientists sometimes call it the fat gene, which is not really nice, but it tells you what it's associated with. FTO is one of the most studied obesity genes because certain variants have a strong correlation with higher body weight and increased appetite. Here's what FTO does. It influences levels of a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. And when ghrelin is high, you feel hungry. When ghrelin drops, you feel satisfied. Normally, after a meal, ghrelin drops and you feel full. That's the signal that says, okay, you've eaten enough, you can stop now. But if you have certain FTO variants, ghrelin doesn't drop as much after eating, or it rises again more quickly. What does this feel like in real life? It feels like you're always hungry. It feels like you finish a meal and you're already thinking about the next one. It feels like everyone else can eat a normal portion and feel satisfied, but you need more. And it feels like your willpower is broken, but it's not broken. It's ghrelin. It's a hormonal signal that genetically is amplified in your body. And about 40 to 60% of people carry at least one copy of the higher risk FTO variant. And it's actually pretty common. And for those who carry 2 copies, one from each parent, the effect is even stronger. But here is the hopeful part. Your genes are not your destiny. Researchers studied Amish communities in Pennsylvania. The Amish have high rates of FTO variants, but their obesity rates are dramatically lower. Why? Because their lifestyle essentially turns off the gene expression. They do physical labor for 3 to 4 hours a day. They walk everywhere. They eat whole, unprocessed foods. They have lower stress. They sleep with natural light cycles. Their environment overrides their genetic predisposition. Your genes load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger. But if you don't know what kind of gun you're carrying, you can't make the right choices to keep it holstered. Someone with FTO variants might need more protein at meals, might need to eat more frequently to manage ghrelin, might need specific strategies for satiety that someone without those variants doesn't need. Same goal, different path to get there. Next gene are the inflammatory response genes. The third category of genes involves your inflammatory response. Remember that cycle I showed you? Visceral fat releasing cytokines, cytokines causing inflammation, inflammation causing insulin resistance. Well, some women are genetically primed to have a bigger inflammatory response. There are genes that control how much TNF-alpha your body produces and how much IL-6 and how reactive your immune system is. There are genes that affect something called nuclear factor kappa B, which is like the master switch for inflammation. Some people have a more sensitive switch than others. If you have genetic variants that make you a high inflammatory responder, that cycle I showed you spins faster and harder than it would for someone else. You eat the same food, you experience the same hormonal changes, but your body's inflammatory response is amplified. You're not imagining that your body reacts more dramatically. It does react more dramatically, and it's in your DNA. Next, the fourth category involves how your body processes estrogen. Beyond just COMT, estrogen gets metabolized in your liver through a series of pathways. There's a phase 1 pathway and a phase 2 pathway. In phase 1, estrogen gets converted into metabolites. These have different effects on your body. One pathway is generally protective. The other pathway can be more inflammatory and has been associated with increased health risk. There's genes like CYP1B1, which influence which pathway pathway dominates. Some women preferentially shunt estrogen down the more inflammatory pathway. In phase 2, these metabolites need to be further processed and eliminated. And this is where genes like COMT come in, plus others involved in methylation, glucuronidation, and sulfation. If any of these phases are compromised, if any of these genetic variants slow down the process, estrogen metabolites build up and they circulate longer and they create more havoc. The fifth category involves insulin signaling itself. There are genes that affect how sensitive your cells are to insulin in the first place, genes that affect glucose transporters, genes that affect how your pancreas produces insulin, and some women are genetically primed for better insulin sensitivity. Their cells respond efficiently to insulin signals. Glucose gets in the cells easily, metabolism runs smoothly. Other women have variants that create a predisposition towards insulin resistance, even before the inflammation from visceral fat makes it worse. For these women, the deck is stacked. They're starting the perimenopause transition already with things that they need to work on. So let me put this all together. You have genes affecting how you clear estrogen, how you respond to stress, how hungry you feel after eating, how much inflammation your body produces, and how sensitive your cells are to insulin. These aren't separate issues. They interact, they compound, and they create a unique metabolic fingerprint which belongs to you and you alone. So your friend who loses weight easily, different fingerprint. Your sister who struggles just like you, maybe a similar fingerprint. Your husband who eats whatever he wants, completely different biology. And this is why there's not a one-size-fits-all answer. There was never a one-size-fits-all answer. All along, it was easier to prescribe these one-size-fits-all approaches because we didn't have the tools to look deeper. And now we do. So let me show you specifically why the advice you've been getting doesn't work. The advice, just eat less, move more, assumes that your body is a simple math equation. Calories in minus calories out equals weight loss or gain, but that's not how it works. If you have a slow COMT and high cortisol, eating less creates more stress on your body. Cortisol goes higher, your body holds on to fat more desperately. And if you have FTO variants and you cut calories, ghrelin goes through the roof. Your hunger becomes unmanageable. You eventually break and overeat, but not from lack of discipline, but because your body is screaming for food. And if your inflammation is driving insulin resistance, it doesn't matter how little you eat, your cells can't use the fuel efficiently anyways. Eat less, move more works for some bodies, but not all bodies. And if it's not working for yours, doing it harder won't help. Common advice number 2, do more cardio. Cardio is great for cardiovascular health. I'm not anti-cardio, but for women in perimenopause with cortisol issues, long, intense cardio sessions can spike cortisol and keep it elevated, especially if you have slow COMT. You're trying to burn fat, but you're actually sending your body to store fat in your midsection. For some women, less intense exercise, walking, yoga, resistance training actually produces better weight loss results because it doesn't trigger the cortisol cascade. But generic advice doesn't tell you that. Generic advice assumes everyone should run more. Common advice number 3, try keto, try intermittent fasting. Keto works beautifully for some women. It stabilizes blood sugar, it reduces insulin. It can be transformative for other women, especially those with certain genetic patterns affecting fat metabolism, or women with cortisol issues, or women with thyroid problems. Keto can backfire. The body perceives the carb restriction as a threat. Cortisol rises, thyroid function slows down. The metabolism adapts to protect you from what it perceives as starvation. Same with intermittent fasting. For some women, it's amazing. For others, it's a stress that makes everything worse. And this is why you've probably tried multiple diets and had them all fail or work for a while and then stop working. You were testing protocols randomly instead of matching them to your biology. Common advice number 4, eat clean. Even healthy foods can work against you if they don't match your genetics. So for example, if you have histamine intolerance, which is influenced by genes affecting the DAO enzyme, fermented foods, aged cheese, avocados, even spinach can trigger inflammation and bloating. And if you have slow COMT and estrogen dominance, soy products might be making your symptoms even worse. If you have certain inflammatory gene patterns, even nightshades, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant could be triggering your immune system. Clean eating means nothing if you're eating clean eating foods that your body treats like a threat. Do you see the problem now? Every piece of advice you've received assumes that you have a generic body, but you have a specific body with specific genetic patterns that determine specific responses to food, exercise, stress, and hormones. Until you know those patterns, you're just guessing. And guessing is why you've been frustrated for years. So what happens when you actually understand your genetics? Let me tell you what I see over and over again with the women that I work with. 1, the cortisol carrier. A woman comes to me, she's exhausted, she's wired at night and tired in the morning. Her belly keeps growing even though she's barely eating. She's tried everything, keto, low calorie, intense workouts, and nothing works. So we take a look at her genetics, and it turns out she has slow COMT. She has variants affecting her stress response. Her body has been in cortisol overdrive for years. And what does she need? Not more intense exercise. That would actually make it worse. Not severe calorie restriction. That spikes cortisol. She needs adaptogens to support adrenal function. She needs phosphatidylserine to blunt cortisol spikes. She needs walking instead of HIIT. She needs specific nutrients like magnesium glycinate and B vitamins that support COMT function. And within weeks of matching her protocol to her genetics, the belly fat starts to shift. Not because she found more willpower, but because she finally stopped fighting her biology. Scenario 2. The hormone havoc. Another woman, she's in perimenopause, brutal symptoms, hot flashes, mood swings, weight gain, concentrated entirely in her midsection. She feels like she's losing her mind, and her genetics shows she has variants affecting estrogen metabolism. She's shunting estrogen down the more inflammatory pathway. Phase 2 liver detoxification is sluggish due to methylation issues, and what does she need? Support for estrogen detoxification. DIM, I3C, calcium D-glucarate, methylation support, potentially methylated B vitamins, but not folic acid, liver support to help clear those metabolites. She doesn't need another generic menopause diet. She needs targeted support for her specific estrogen processing issues. And when she gets that, the symptoms calm down, the inflammation decreases, the weight starts responding. She starts to feel like her again. Scenario 3, the sugar shaper. Another woman, her issue is blood sugar. She crashes hard in the afternoon. She craves carbs constantly. She's been told she's pre-diabetic. She should just eat less sugar. She's tried to eat less sugar for years, and she can't sustain it. Her genetics show FGO variants affecting hunger hormones. She also has variants affecting insulin signaling. What does she need? Higher protein at every meal to trigger satiety, chromium and berberine to support insulin sensitivity, eating on a consistent schedule, not intermittent fasting, which makes her hunger worse. Specific fiber strategies to slow glucose absorption. She doesn't need more willpower against cravings. She needs to address the biological drivers of those cravings. And when she does, the cravings quiet down, her energy stabilizes, her blood sugar normalizes, and the weight finally starts to respond. These aren't imaginary examples. These are real patterns I see every single week of women who have tried everything, women who have been told to just try harder, women who thought that they were broken. They weren't broken. They were mismatched. The diet they were on did not match their genetics. The exercise they were doing did not match their genetics. The supplements they were taking did not match their genetics. Everything changed when they stopped guessing and started knowing. So where does this leave you? You have 2 options. Option 1, keep guessing. Keep trying random diets. Keep doing what worked for your friend or what some influencer recommended. Keep hoping that this time it will be different. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll stumble onto something that happens to match your genetics. It's possible. But more likely, you'll keep cycling through the same frustration, lose some weight, plateau, regain, feel like a failure, try something else, repeat. That's not a plan. That's a lottery ticket. Or option 2, know your genetics. Stop guessing. Find out what you're actually working with. When you understand your genetic patterns, how you process estrogen, how you respond to stress, how your hunger hormones behave, how your cells respond to insulin, how much inflammation you produce, everything changes. And you stop copying what worked for someone else, and you stop fighting your biology, and you start working with it. You know exactly which foods support your body and which ones work against you. You know exactly what type of exercise helps you and which type makes things worse. You know exactly which supplements your body needs, not just some generic list for women over 40. This is precision. This is personalization. This is the future of health and weight loss and longevity. And honestly, it should have been the start starting point all along. If you've been beating yourself up because the things that used to work don't work anymore, I need you to hear something. You are not the problem. Your body changed, your hormones shifted, and you have genetic patterns that determine exactly how hard or easy this transition is for you. Some women got dealt an easier hand, and some women, maybe you, got dealt a harder one. That's not fair, but it is knowable. And once you know it, you can finally play the hand you were actually dealt instead of pretending that you have cards that you don't. The women who figure this out, who stop following generic advice and start understanding their own biology, those are the women who finally break free. I've seen it hundreds of times. Women who thought they were broken, women who had tried everything, women who were ready to give up. And then they got the information they actually needed about their own bodies, their own genetics, their own patterns, and everything shifted. Not because they found more willpower, not because they finally got serious, but because they finally had the right information. And that can be you. I'm Dr. Phyllis, and I help women understand the genetic patterns driving their weight and their health so they can stop fighting their biology and start working with it. If this resonated with you, if you finally feel like someone explained what's been happening in your body, subscribe to this channel. I'm going to keep breaking down the science that they don't teach you and the real reasons behind what you're experiencing and the real solutions that actually work. And if you're watching this thinking, I need to know my genetics, I need to know my patterns, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want to understand why your husband can eat the same thing as you and lose weight faster, and what that tells you about your own biology, watch this one next.